Why did the cop bring a ladder to the bar? He heard the drinks were on the house. Speaking of cops and houses, let me tell you about some truly fucked up shit that went down in a seemingly ordinary neighborhood. It was just another quiet night on patrol for Officer Johnson. The streets were empty, streetlights casting an eerie glow on the rain-slicked asphalt. Johnson yawned, fighting off the boredom of another uneventful shift. If only he knew the horror that awaited him. As he turned onto Elm Street, dispatch crackled to life over the radio. "We've got a 911 call from 13113 Elm. Female caller sounds distressed. Claims to hear strange noises in her attic. Proceed with caution." Johnson's pulse quickened as he flipped on his sirens and sped towards the address. These calls usually turned out to be nothing, a raccoon in the trash or pipes settling in an old house. But something about this one felt different. He pulled up to a dilapidated Victorian, paint peeling and shutters hanging crooked. As Johnson approached the front door, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. An overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. He knocked firmly. "Police! Anyone home?" Silence. Just as he was about to knock again, the door creaked open, seemingly on its own. Johnson drew his weapon and entered cautiously. "Hello? This is the police. Is anyone here?" The floorboards groaned under his feet as he made his way through the darkened house. A musty, rotten smell assaulted his nostrils. Something was very wrong here. Climbing the stairs to the second floor, Johnson heard a faint whimpering coming from down the hall. He followed the sound to a closed door. Taking a deep breath, he turned the handle. The bedroom was empty save for a ratty mattress on the floor. But the whimpering continued, seeming to emanate from the ceiling. Johnson's gaze drifted upwards to the attic access panel. It was slightly ajar. "Ma'am, are you up there? This is the police. I'm here to help." The whimpering stopped abruptly. Then a blood-curdling shriek pierced the silence, causing Johnson to stumble backwards. The attic panel flew open, and an emaciated figure came hurtling out, landing on all fours like some feral animal. Johnson's training kicked in, and he raised his weapon. "Freeze! Don't move!" But as the creature lifted its head, Johnson's blood ran cold. The face staring back at him was barely human, skin stretched taut over protruding bones, milky white eyes rolling wildly, mouth opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. Before Johnson could react, the thing lunged at him with inhuman speed. He fired 2 rounds center mass, but it didn't even slow it down. Razor claws raked across his chest as they tumbled to the floor. Johnson fought desperately, but the creature's strength was unnatural. As its jaws clamped down on his throat, Johnson's last thoughts were of his family. He prayed they would never know the horror he faced in his final moments. The next day, another officer responded to a missing persons report for Johnson. But the house at 1313 Elm Street was empty, with no sign that anyone had been there for years. Why don't police officers like to play hide and seek? Good thing they didn't try playing with whatever the fuck was hiding in that attic, am I right? Now let me tell you about another cop who stumbled across something he really wishes he could unsee. Detective Miller had seen some shit in his 20 years on the force. Gruesome crime scenes, mangled bodies, the depths of human depravity. But nothing could have prepared him for what he encountered that fateful night. It started as a routine missing persons case. A local woman hadn't shown up for work in days, and her co-workers were concerned. Miller expected to find her passed out drunk or shacked up with a new boyfriend. Instead, he walked into a nightmare. The woman's apartment was immaculate, almost too clean, no sign of struggle or foul play. But as Miller moved through the rooms, a faint metallic odor tickled his nostrils. Following the scent, he found himself standing before a locked door. "Police! Open up!" he called out, pounding on the door. No response. Drawing his sidearm, Miller kicked the door in. The stench that assaulted him nearly made him vomit. The room beyond was dimly lit by flickering candles, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. and in the center. Miller's mind recoiled, refusing to process the horrific scene before him. The missing woman lay splayed on an altar-like table, her chest cavity splayed open, but her organs had been rearranged, twisted into obscene shapes and patterns that defied logic. Symbols were carved into her flesh and painted on the walls in blood. Miller recognized some as occult markings, but others were like nothing he'd ever seen before. As his eyes adjusted to the gloom, Miller realized with mounting terror that the woman's eyes were open and moving. Somehow, impossibly, she was still alive. Her lips parted and she spoke in a voice that was not her own, deep and guttural, speaking words in no earthly language. The candles flared, and for a moment Miller saw something hovering over the woman's mutilated body, a shape of writhing shadows and grasping tendrils. Miller emptied his clip into the apparition, but the bullets passed harmlessly through. As the thing turned its attention to him, Miller fled in blind panic. He ran until his lungs burned, not stopping until he reached his car. The official report stated that the woman died of a drug overdose. The coroner found no evidence of the mutilations Miller described. But Miller knew what he saw. He quit the force soon after and moved far away, but he never stopped looking over his shoulder, wondering when the horror he glimpsed that night would come for him. Why did the cop sit on the toilet? To do his duty. Unlike poor Detective Miller, who probably shit himself running from whatever ungodly thing he saw in that apartment. Now let's lighten the mood with a joke before diving into our next disturbing tale. What do you call a clairvoyant dwarf who escaped from prison, a small medium at large? Speaking of prisons, our next story takes place in a jail with a very unwelcome guest. The county jail wasn't much to look at, just a squat concrete building on the outskirts of town. But it had a reputation. Inmates whispered about strange noises in the night, shadowy figures that vanished when you looked directly at them. And then there was Sarah. Sarah Ware had been executed in the jail back in the 1920s for murdering her abusive husband. Ever since, guards and prisoners alike reported encounters with her restless spirit. Most were harmless pranks, lights flickering, objects moving on their own. But sometimes, Sarah got angry. Officer Martinez had heard the stories, of course, but she didn't put much stock in ghost tales. That is, until her first night shift at the jail. It started small, a cold spot here, a door slamming there. Martinez shrugged it off as old building noises. But as the night wore on, things escalated. The panic alarm in a locked office suddenly blared to life, nearly giving Martinez a heart attack. When she rushed to investigate, the alarm abruptly cut off. The office was empty, the alarm switch still firmly in place. Returning to her post, Martinez noticed the TV in the break room had turned itself on, cycling rapidly through channels before shutting off again. She told herself there had to be a rational explanation, maybe faulty wiring or a power surge. But deep down, Martinez knew something was very wrong. The air felt charged, oppressive, like the calm before a storm. As she made her rounds checking on the inmates, Martinez heard sobbing coming from an empty cell. She approached cautiously, shining her flashlight inside. For a split second, she glimpsed a woman in an old-fashioned dress huddled in the corner. But when Martinez blinked, the apparition was gone. Her heart racing, Martinez hurried back towards the guard station. But as she rounded the corner, she came face to face with Sarah Ware herself. The ghost's eyes blazed with otherworldly fury as she lunged at Martinez with spectral hands outstretched. Martinez's scream died in her throat as icy fingers closed around her neck. She struggled frantically, but her hands passed right through Sarah's ethereal form. As darkness crept into the edges of her vision, Martinez's last thought was that she should have believed the stories. The next morning, they found Martinez unconscious on the floor, angry red marks circling her throat. She quit the job immediately after being released from the hospital. To this day, she refuses to speak about what happened that night. But the haunting continues, Sarah Ware's restless spirit still seeking vengeance from beyond the grave. Why don't cops make good boxers? They always throw in the towel. Unlike Officer Martinez, who probably wishes she could have thrown in the towel before her terrifying encounter with Sarah's ghost. Our final tale proves that sometimes the most horrifying monsters wear a badge. Deputy Tom Rawlins was well liked in the small town of Millbrook, always ready with a smile and a helping hand for his neighbors. A real pillar of the community, folks said. If only they knew the darkness that lurked behind that friendly facade. It started small. Tom would pull over pretty young women for minor traffic violations, letting them off with a warning in exchange for their phone numbers. He told himself it was harmless flirting, but soon, that wasn't enough to satisfy the growing hunger inside him. He began following women home from bars, learning their routines. The power he felt watching them, knowing they had no idea he was there, was intoxicating. Tom's fantasies grew darker, more violent. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't stop himself. One night, Tom finally snapped. He followed a woman to her isolated farmhouse on the outskirts of town. As she fumbled for her keys, Tom approached from behind and struck her unconscious. He dragged her inside, his pulse racing with sick excitement. For hours, Tom indulged his most depraved urges. The woman's screams only fueled his frenzy. When he was finished, Tom knew he couldn't let her live to identify him. He strangled her with his bare hands, reveling in the feeling of the life draining from her body. As Tom disposed of the evidence, he felt no remorse, only exhilaration and a burning need to do it again and again. Over the next year, 5 more women vanished without a trace. The town was gripped by fear as the police seemed powerless to catch the killer. Little did they know the monster was hiding in plain sight among their ranks. Tom grew bolder with each murder, taking more risks. He kept trophies from his victims, reliving the kills when the urges grew too strong. But his luck couldn't last forever. One night, Tom made a mistake. He didn't realize his latest victim's boyfriend was in the house. As Tom attacked the woman, her boyfriend burst in and caught him in the act. A furious struggle ensued. Tom's police training gave him an edge, but the boyfriend fought like a man possessed. In the chaos, Tom's mask slipped off. The boyfriend's eyes widened in shock as he recognized the town's beloved deputy. Tom knew in that moment it was all over. With a roar of rage, he snapped the boyfriend's neck, but the damage was done. It was only a matter of time before he was caught. As Tom fled into the night, his mind raced. He couldn't go to prison, couldn't face the shame, the disgust in his friends' and family's eyes when they learned what he truly was. There was only one way out. They found Tom's body 2 days later, hanging from a tree deep in the woods. The official report ruled it a suicide. Only Tom's final victims knew the full, horrifying truth of the monster that had stalked their town. The next time you see a friendly police officer, remember, you never truly know what darkness may be hiding behind that badge. Why did the computer go to police school? To learn how to fight cybercrime. Unlike Deputy Tom, who used his position of authority to commit unspeakable crimes. I guess you could say he really took his oath to protect and serve in a fucked up direction. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed these disturbing true tales from the boys in blue. Sweet dreams. And remember, the next time you get pulled over, pray it's just a routine traffic stop and not something far more sinister. Stay safe out there.